So we have talked a little bit about deputyship and what is deputyship. So just to say again, really, it's when there is no other way to manage a person's property and affairs, so that there's no attorney, that person isn't able to make a lasting power of attorney, and there's no appointee, or it might be that a person's assets, so their money and their property, they've got too much for the appointee to manage, because an appointee manages benefits and therefore they need a deputy. And as we said, this would be a property and affairs deputy, but there are also the personal welfare deputies. And as Rosie said, that they're not as common. So maybe a few hundred a year personal welfare deputies are appointed compared to thousands of property and affairs deputies. And I will come back to personal welfare deputies, so I suspect there's quite a lot of questions about that. So the big difference with the deputyship and the power of attorney is that with making a lasting power of attorney, you are choosing who you want to support you with decisions. A deputy is appointed by the Court of Protection, but that doesn't mean your wishes aren't taken into account, and that doesn't mean that it's not about supporting you to make decisions if you have a deputy. So who can be a deputy? Well, you need to be over 18, and if it's for financial matters, you mustn't be bankrupt. Usually it's family or close friends who are appointed as deputies because they know the person best. But if there's conflict, or if there's no one suitable or no one willing to be a deputy, or maybe it's a complicated situation, or somebody's got a big compensation award, then you might have a professional deputy. And that's usually a solicitor, and that's what I do. I support people to manage their property and affairs where my boss is their deputy. And the Office of the Public Guardian also has a list of deputies who are called panel deputies, and the court can call on them, the court can ask them to step in and be a deputy if it's needed. And sadly, that's quite often the case where you might have had attorneys who, the ones I tend to get, are where unfortunately they've run off with someone's money, and that person then isn't able to make another power of attorney, and then we end up with a deputy. Quite often you might end up with a solicitor at that point. So if you're thinking of applying to be a deputy to someone, it does need careful consideration. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of time. You're working with a wide network of people to support someone to make a decision. So it's interesting, and I love it. But of course, if you're doing it in your own time and you're caring or got other responsibilities, there's a lot to consider. And there's also, as you might know if you're already supporting people, daily battles with the banks who don't seem to understand attorneys or deputies, or that someone can have capacity to make some decisions and not others. Deputies are supervised by the Office of the Public Guardian, who we've mentioned before, and you have to provide them with an annual report, and this details the person's income, what you've spent their money on, and the decisions you've made. So that's slightly different to an attorney who doesn't have any of those responsibilities to let the Office of the Public Guardian know what they're doing. You might also need to make more applications to the Court of Protection. When you become a deputy, and I'll talk about that in a minute, you get an order and it tells you what you can and can't do. And some things won't be in there, and it just depends, but you might have to apply, for example, to buy a house or sell a house, or you might have to apply to the Court of Protection if you want to pay a family member to provide care. So there are lots of things that you might have to do and you need to consider. So how do you become a deputy? Well, as we've said, you need to make an application to the Court of Protection, and they have some forms that you need to use to make the application. Now, they are available, and we will put the links in the write-up on the internet, on the government website. There is a court fee, there are some exemptions for that. You will have to notify at least 3 people about the application, and that's usually close family members, but there's lists of who you need to notify. And it's not a quick process. It can take 4 to 6 months, maybe more than that. So it's a lot slower than getting a lasting power of attorney. So when you're appointed deputy, the first thing you'll get if you're a financial deputy is you'll be asked to put what's called a bond in place. Now, this is like insurance. So if you do something wrong and the person loses money, or you run off with all their money and go around the world, a bit difficult at the moment, then this is insurance in case that happens. And the court explains to you how to do this. You will then get your order. Now, your order is really a couple of pieces of paper. It's a document, and it's what we call sealed by the court. So it'll have a stamp on it, and you'll be able to feel where the stamp is, so you know it's the original order. I've just seen pop up, how much is the bond? I should say, the court decides how much the bond is going to be. So it depends how much money and how much property the person has. So if you are a millionaire, then the bond will be higher than if you don't have very much money, and you have to pay what's called a premium. So you pay a certain amount each year, and like you would feel maybe like your house insurance, you pay a certain amount each year depending on what you're insuring. So I hope that has answered that question. And although the order sets out what you can and can't do, I mean, what we've kind of repeatedly said, and you need to remember, is that as a deputy, just like an attorney, if the person can make the decision, then as a deputy you can't make that decision, it's their decision. And if they can't make the decision, then you need to follow the best interest process when you're making decisions. And we did, as we said, talk a lot about best interest in the last session, which is in the write-up.